Okay, hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Jim Jacobson, and you're listening to the GMAT broadcast on Grockit.com. I guess I shouldn't say the GMAT broadcast. We actually probably will at one point have more than one broadcast. This one, though, is the OGTV broadcast, where we go through the official guide to the test. That's why it says that right down there. We're going through the entire book, question by question, and giving you answers, explanations, occasional smiley faces next to correct answers, and getting you from one end of the book to the other. We've started the critical reasoning section of the book and done 2 sessions of that. Last time we left off on page, we finished on page 491, so we're moving on to page 492. A word of advice for those of you who are new to the program: this will not be very helpful to you if you do not have the book in front of you. You really do need to have your own copy of the, excuse me, I'm going to cough here. Excuse me. You really do need to have your own copy of the official guide to the test produced by GMAT. And it does need to be the 12th edition because the question numbers end up being a little bit different. So the 12th edition has the purple cover and the gold writing outside and the big 12 on it. The big 12 is towards the top. I just had to go look at the cover to find out. Anyway, so when we left off last time, like I said, we were going to start on page 492 with question number 22. And the format here again is that I will read the question to you, something that would have taken too long on the reading comprehension side, but in critical reasoning it's not so crazy. I will give kind of an analysis of what information we could use from the question stem and the prompt before we get to the answer choices, if anything, and then go through all the answer choices, including the wrong ones, because there are some patterns to many of the wrong answer choices, and it's worth your while to learn how to recognize wrong answer choices when you see them. I've been following the format of reading the questions in the order that they appear. That is to say, I don't read the question itself first and then read the passage. That is a valid and useful strategy for some people. I personally find it more valuable to concentrate on what's going on in the passage first, understand that as well as I can, and then look at the question and then just skim for the part that I need to get to. You should do in your own studies what appears to be most valuable to you, and I do recommend doing a little bit of time trials to figure out which one increases your time and, increases your time efficiency, which would actually decrease your time, and increases your accuracy. If you have a choice between the two, go for increased accuracy. Your score is entirely determined by the number of questions you get right. So anyway, number 22. So we have this plan. The plan says, concerned about the welfare of its senior citizens, the government of Runagia decided 2 years ago to increase by 20% the government-provided pension paid to all Runagians aged 65 and older. The result was that many Runagian senior citizens are no better off financially now than they were before the increase. Further information: the annual rate of inflation since the pension increase has been below 5%, and the increased pension has been duly received by all eligible Runagians. So, to summarize the argument, the government 2 years ago decided to increase the pension of senior citizens by 20%, and the increase in, the rate of inflation has been below 5% the entire time, and yet the senior citizens are no better off. So the core of the argument is the senior citizens' pension increased and they didn't get any more money. So basically, in order for that, the question is, in light of the further information, which of the following, if true, does most to explain the result that followed implementation of the plan? So the pension went up, money stayed the same. So in order for that to happen, basically we need something else to have gone up, something else that cost them more money. Since inflation itself, kind of the value of their money stayed the same and was relatively low. So we need something else to go up in our answer choice. Let's take a look for that. So choice A, the majority of senior citizens whose financial position has not improved rely entirely on the government pension for their income. Well, that doesn't really change anything at all. That's basically a neutral answer choice. Just because they rely on that, if anything, that makes it even stranger that their financial picture did not change. If most of them if for most of them this was a small fraction of their income, we could have explained how they were no better off by perhaps rampant unemployment or cuts in their other sources of income. So this doesn't help us at all. Choice B, the Ronadian banking system is so inefficient that cashing a pension check can take as much as 3 weeks. While I'm sure that is not that fun, remember that very often those wrong answer choices introduce time and money, time or money, when time or money is not really central to the argument. And in this case, the time it takes to cash a check, you know, who cares? It's, I mean, I'm sure the people in this fictional country actually care, but for the purposes of our argument, the fact that it takes longer to cash a check has no impact on whether they eventually get the money and would be able to meet their expenses. They would need to budget up to 3 weeks in advance, but after they do that, there's no difference between getting the money instantly, so it's not B. C, the prices of goods and services that meet the special needs of many senior citizens have increased at a rate much higher than the rate of inflation. So choice C actually does have something increasing. It has senior citizen costs increasing. So this is actually pretty tempting. We needed something to balance out the increase in the pension, something else increasing on the other side of the balance sheet. That sounds good. I guess it would be the income statement, not the balance sheet. Anyway, choice D, the pension increase occurred at a time when the number of Runadians aged 65 and older who were living below the poverty level was at an all-time high. So the poverty level is also irrelevant here, because the issue here was that there was this pension going out to the senior citizens. We're not told where they are in terms of poverty, only that despite the increase, they were no better off. All of them may still be below poverty level, but the increase should have increased their quality of life, and that's the mystery, not whether they are above or below the poverty line. So D is irrelevant. And choice E, the most recent pension increase was only the second such increase in the last 10 years. So that's interesting, and perhaps it's unfortunate, I don't know, but that's completely outside the scope of what we're dealing with. We don't care how many there have been, we only care why this one apparently did nothing. Except, of course, realistically, it probably didn't do nothing. If the pension increase hadn't gone through, those expenses still would have gone up and they would have been worse off, but still. Choice C explains why a 20% increase with no increase in inflation could have resulted in no change. Still page 492. And now question number 23. A drug that is highly effective in treating many types of infection can, at present, be obtained only from the bark of the Ibora, a tree that is quite rare in the wild. It takes the bark of 5,000 trees to make 1 kilogram of the drug. It follows, therefore, that continued production of the drug must inevitably lead to the Ibora's extinction. Which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the argument above? So the argument above, again, we always want to paraphrase it, distill it down to a short phrase that we can test answer choices against. So it's rare in the wild, much is needed, and it will go extinct for that reason. Okay, so in order to weaken it, typically we would need to weaken one of these two things. These aspects of the prediction that the Ibora tree will go extinct. So in our answer choices, we would either find something addressing the issue of how it's rare in the wild. Notice how that doesn't say anything about how it might be bred in captivity, or that it's going to be planted more they found a new habitat for it. And then that a lot is needed. Something else that could weaken it is if they had a new procedure that reduced the amount that they needed to harvest by 1,000%. So an answer choice that addressed one of these two things would weaken the argument that this Ebora tree will go extinct. So we need one of these two things to be addressed. Choice A, the drug made from Ebora bark is dispensed to doctors from a central authority. Doesn't address them being rare in the wild or much being needed. That's not it. Choice B, the drug made from Ebora bark is expensive to produce. Those of you following my broadcast and listening to me even occasionally at this point on critical reasoning recognize there's the money one. I don't know if we get one that says that it takes time to actually produce the medicine, but those would both be typical GMAT wrong answer choices. Anyway, this is the money trap. It's not about money this time. Choice C, the leaves of the Ebora are used in a number of medical products. Again, if anything, that makes it needed even more, so that doesn't weaken it. Choice D, the Ebora can be propagated from cuttings and grown under cultivation. So that actually does address this rare in the wild thing. If they're able to cultivate it in fields or orchards or whatever, the rarity of the tree in the wild is no longer the issue, and the tree need not go extinct. So that actually sounds really good, but let's check E. The Ebora generally grows in largely inaccessible places. Well, that neither addresses the rarity in the wild or how much is needed, so it's not choice E either. So that leaves us with choice D. If they're able to grow it, if they're able to cultivate it themselves, the tree in the wild can be left alone. Answer choice D. Still page 492. And now it's question number 24. The Plexus Corporation, a leading computer chip manufacturer, is currently developing a new chip, which is faster and more efficient than any computer chip currently in use. The new chip will be released for sale in 12 months. Plexus's market research has shown that initial sales of the new chip would be maximized by starting to advertise it now, but the company has decided to wait another 6 months before doing so. Which of the following, if true, provides the Plexus Corporation with the best reason for postponing advertising its new chip? First, let's summarize the argument. The argument is start now, advertising now for the 12-month later release. Start now, initial sales will be maximized. But they are actually going to start in 6 months. Okay. So now remember how I've always mentioned that, time and money, and I just wrote them down in the reverse order of what I said, but you get the idea. Time and money are very often wrong answer choices. They're wrong answer choices when the passage isn't about that. This one is actually about time and money, so we don't want to be as exclusive about these particular wrong answer choices because those could be in the right answer. So the core of the argument is initial sales will be maximized. If they start now, why would they wait? There must be some other reason why they would not. Why having their initial sales maximized would still not be beneficial to the Plexus Corporation. So, if you think about that for a moment, a corporation, just in the simplest terms, they are probably going to lose something else by maximizing their initial sales. Is it customers? Is it money? Is it market share? Who knows? But we need to look for something like that, something valuable that the Plexus Corporation would lose despite having its initial sales maximized. Why would they wait 6 months? Let's look. Choice A. Some computer users are reluctant to purchase new computer products when they are first released. So at first this might even sound tempting. We just mentioned that customers would be one of those things that they would be worried about. But remember, we're talking about initial sales. The fact that some people are going to wait is basically irrelevant to the argument. We're talking about initial sales and when to start advertising. So choice A is kind of outside the scope. It's these guys and women, guys in the gender-neutral way, who buy stuff, who are later adopters, to use the technological term. Okay, so choice B, the cost of an advertising campaign capable of maximizing initial sales of the new chip would be no greater than campaigns previously undertaken by Plexus. So if anything, this would strengthen the now approach. If it's not, so remember we were worried about, or we were looking for something that would cost them more maybe. Cost them customers, cost them market share, cost them money. But if the advertising campaign costs the same amount, that isn't it. And in fact, it strengthens the argument that they should start now because it's not going to cost any more and they get more in sales. We don't need to strengthen the argument, though. We need to find out why. We need to weaken the plan of starting now or strengthen the plan of starting in 6 months. Choice C, advertising the new chip now will significantly decrease sales of Plexus's current line of computer chips. Wow, okay, so even though initial sales of the new product would be maximized, it will significantly decrease sales of their current line of chips. That sounds like the sort of loss that might cause them to wait 6 months. So I think we can put a smiley face next to that one. Choice D, Plexus's major rivals in the computer chip manufacturing business are developing a chip with capabilities that are comparable to those of Plexus's new chip. If anything, that's in the now camp. Start now so that they can maximize their initial sales because they'll be fighting for market share later. That's not right. And choice E, taking full advantage of the capacities of the new chip will require substantial adjustments in other segments of the computer industry. You know, the rest of the computer industry, not really an issue. Again, in the real world, that would be an important thing, and Plexus would want to talk to its business partners and things like that about the impact of this exciting new technology. But in terms of this, it's really about starting now or starting 6 months from now, and what's happening to the rest of the industry. That's going to be true no matter, the chip comes out in 12 months either way. So it's coming, and so the fact that the rest of the industry will have to adjust, it's outside the scope of the passage and kind of irrelevant to when they start advertising. Anyway, that leaves us with choice C as the correct answer. Okay, page 492, number 25. Last one on 492. Many breakfast cereals are fortified with vitamin supplements. Some of these cereals provide 100% of the recommended daily requirement of vitamins. Nevertheless, a well-balanced breakfast, including a variety of foods, is a better source of those vitamins than are such fortified cereal. Okay, I'll just start over with the whole sentence. Nevertheless, a well-balanced breakfast, including a variety of foods, is a better source of those vitamins than are such fortified breakfast cereals alone. Which of the following, if true, would most strongly support the position above? So the position above, we need to paraphrase clearly, and then we need to support it. The position above is that fortified cereals with their 100% recommended daily allowance are not enough or not the best. And this is USRDA vitamins. So we need to strengthen the idea that having 100% of the recommended daily allowance of vitamins added to your cereal, we need a reason that that's not the best. So maybe a study that shows that, or something about eating the same type of food, because remember, this is the implication is that people would be just eating this cereal instead of a variety of foods. So And that's actually the counter option. So we need a reason why eating a variety of foods would be better than these fortified cereals. Let's see what we get. Answer choice A. In many foods, the natural combination of vitamins with other nutrients makes those vitamins more usable by the body than are vitamins added in vitamin supplements. Well, that sounds pretty good, actually, because what this is saying basically is that so vitamin supplements are these guys. And the variety of foods are the natural ones. So what they're saying is that even though 100% of the recommended daily requirement is added to these cereals, the way that they're set up in the food material thing is not best usable by the body, whereas the variety of foods, the way the vitamins and other nutrients interact, your body gets more use out of it. So that would be a reason why the variety of natural foods might be better than and would support the argument that the variety of natural foods would be better than the fortified cereals. So A is pretty good. Let's look at the other ones, though. Choice B, people who regularly eat cereals fortified with vitamin supplements sometimes neglect to eat the foods in which the vitamins occur naturally. Sure. I mean, even if that's true, though, it doesn't support the argument that the natural foods are better. If they're getting the same nutrients, do you actually need to eat your broccoli if you're getting the same stuff from cereal? No, choice B doesn't really support the argument. Choice C, foods often must be fortified with vitamin supplements because naturally occurring vitamins are removed during processing. This is one of those ones I think that's meant to attract outside knowledge. This is absolutely the case. Bleached enriched flour has most of its goodness bleached out of it. And it's enriched because the vitamins were taken out. However, just because it's true doesn't mean it's the answer that supports the argument. This is meant to attract people who know something about food science or nutrition. The fact that foods must be fortified with vitamins does not support the notion that natural foods are better. If the vitamins added to fortified cereals are just as good as those in natural foods, fortified cereals are just as good. Choice C does not support the point of the passage. Choice D, unprocessed cereals are naturally high in several of the vitamins that are usually added to fortified breakfast cereals. That would be nice, but we're talking about several of the vitamins. Just because the natural foods have several, these guys have 100% of the what you're supposed to have. So it still sounds like the fortified ones are better. It certainly doesn't support the idea that the variety of natural foods would somehow be superior. Choice E, cereals containing vitamin supplements are no harder to digest than similar cereals without added vitamins. If anything, this would weaken the notion that the natural variety of foods is better, because this says that fortified cereals are no harder to digest and they have more of the nutrients, or more of the vitamins, so it's not E. Choice A, that says that the natural variety of foods, the chemistry of it makes it better, easier for your body, better for your body to absorb the things that way. Okay. On to the next page, which we were kind of already on anyway, because the question went over the jump. Number 26. When a polygraph test is judged inconclusive, this is no reflection on the examinee. Rather, such a judgment means that the test has failed to show whether the examinee was truthful or untruthful. Nevertheless, employers will sometimes refuse to hire a job applicant because of an inconclusive polygraph test result. For those of you following along at home, polygraph, if that's not a phrase you're familiar with, that's the lie detector, test. I guess if you watch crime shows, you probably knew that. But just to be safe, polygraph, lie detector test. Anyway, so which of the following conclusions can be most properly drawn from the information above? This is an inference question where the traditional analysis of, evidence plus assumption equals conclusion isn't really going to do you too much good. We just need to draw an inference from this. If anything, the inference might be a conclusion that you could say. You could say, therefore, blah. it's not always a very final sounding conclusion. The other thing to remember about inferences is that they are very small logical leaps. In many respects, the right answer choice with inference questions will almost appear too easy. It will be often something that you yourself, in reading the passage, naturally inferred on your own, which is how it's supposed to work. If the author actually had to explain everything, the passages, all of human communication would be much longer. So inferences are a part of communication. You just need to practice being able to identify ones you can make. Okay. So the other thing then to mention about inference questions is that the support for it needs to be in the passage. It's not something that might be true. There will, and so that's one of the things that's most typically a wrong answer choice on inference questions. Things that could well be true, but there's not enough evidence in the passage to actually support that notion. So let's see what the answer choices have for us. Choice A, most examinees with inconclusive polygraph test results are in fact untruthful. So this is exactly the sort of thing I was talking about. This may in fact be the reason why employers are reluctant to hire people who have inconclusive polygraph results. If most of them are untruthful, it's a safe bet that it's a pretty safe bet to just choose to not hire those people. However, there's nothing in the passage that suggests that that's actually the case. Because in fact what it says is it's no reflection on the examinee when it's inconclusive. All it says is that it failed to show whether the person was truthful or untruthful. So it's too much to infer that most people who get inconclusive results are in fact filthy liars. Choice A cannot be the right one. Choice B, can we conclude that polygraph tests should not be used by employers in the consideration of job applicants? Again, if it said that most polygraph tests are highly unreliable, that actually could be a good basis for choosing B, but there's no support in the passage for what employers should or should not do. Choice C, an inconclusive polygraph test result is sometimes unfairly held against the examinee. So, and this is a classic example of an inference answer. If you are in fact a truthful person, and your polygraph test turns up inconclusive, and an employer chooses not to hire you, despite the fact that you are the most truthful person on the planet, that is, by many people's reckoning, actually kind of unfair. Okay, so your worldview may differ somewhat, I suppose, but I guess that's one of the challenges of the GMAT. In this particular case, though, because some people who are in fact truthful will be not hired because of this inconclusive test result, that is unfair. That's an inference we can make from the passage because it says, it says inconclusive does not equal untruthful, yet some people will not be hired anyway. That's unfair, and we can infer that. Let's check the others. Choice D, a polygraph test indicating that an examinee is untruthful can sometimes be mistaken. So this sounds very plausible at first, but really that's not actually what the passage says. What it says is that when it's inconclusive, that one is clearly mistaken because the person is either truthful or untruthful. Inconclusive results are mistaken. There's no support in the passage for the idea that untruthful results are wrong, even though that probably happens too. I don't know, maybe you all know, maybe you are all polygraph experts and polygraph scientists, polygraphologists. It's not choice D in any case. E, some employers have refused to consider the results of polygraph tests when evaluating job applicants. Well, in order to refuse to consider the results, basically they would probably need we need evidence in the passage for an employer to have hired somebody who got an untruthful result or chosen to not hire somebody that they otherwise would have hired even though they got a truthful result. Those are the only things from the passage that we could get from that to choice E. While it certainly is true that some employers haven't considered the results, there's nothing in the passage that suggests that. And the ones who get not inconsiderate. inconclusive. The ones who get the inconclusive result are considering it and just playing it on the conservative side. So anyway, it's not E. It is in fact C, that someone who is truthful getting an inconclusive result, not getting hired. That's a little bit unfair. So still page 493, number 27. For similar cars and comparable drivers, automobile insurance for collision damage has always cost more in Greatport than in Fairmont. Police studies, however, show that cars owned by Greatport residents are, on average, slightly less likely to be involved in a collision than cars in Fairmont. Clearly, therefore, insurance companies are making a greater profit on collision damage insurance in Greatport than in Fairmont. In evaluating the argument, it would be most useful to compare which of the following. So, evaluating the argument. The argument is, so we have two cities. We have Greatport, and we have Fairmont. And the information we have is accidents and insurance rates. So accidents or likelihood in Greatport is lower, in Fairmont it's higher. Insurance in Greatport is higher, and in Fairmont it is presumably lower because those are the two things we're comparing. It's a binary opposition. The conclusion is that insurance companies are getting a greater profit in Greatport because accidents are down and the insurance rates are higher. So, in order to compare that, basically, in order to evaluate the argument, what would we need to compare between Greatport and Fairmont? Because on the surface of it, if there are fewer accidents and they're collecting more money from each person, it sounds like on the surface that they would be paying out less money. The way that the insurance company would not necessarily be making a greater profit, in a sense to weaken it, would be if for some reason they had to pay out more money in some other way. Okay, so even though they're collecting more and there are fewer accidents, what if each accident is more expensive? What if the people in Greatport have nicer cars? Or what if there's only one shop in Greatport that fixes cars and the guy is a big jerk and he charges, $10,000 every time anything happens? You would hope that the people of Greatport would just take their car somewhere else. But anyway, the answer choice needs to have some reason why, or some reason we would need to verify that the costs are not in fact greater in Greatport than in Fairmont. If the costs are not greater in Greatport, insurance companies are making a greater profit. If the costs are greater in Greatport, then the insurance companies maybe aren't making a greater profit, which is the argument being made. Okay, so choice A. We would want to compare the level of traffic congestion in Greatport with the level of traffic congestion in Fairmont. So so we need cost. Cost is what we're looking for here. The level of traffic congestion is irrelevant, actually, because really what all that matters, traffic congestion does not cause insurance claims. Accidents cause insurance claims. So just because knowing that one is more congested than the other, all that actually matters is the number of claims and the number of accidents. So it's not A. Choice B, the cost of repairing collision damage in Greatport with the cost of repairing collision damage in Fairmont. So cost sounds a lot like what we were hoping for. That's that was what we were, repairing collision damage was one of the things we were after. C, the rates Greatport residents pay for other forms of insurance with the rates paid for similar insurance by residents of Fairmont. Other insurances are outside the scope of the actual argument. The question is whether the insurance companies are getting a greater profit on collision insurance in Greatport. So C is outside the scope. Choice D, the condition of Greatport's roads and streets with the condition of Fairmont's roads and streets. Choice D is a lot like choice A. All that matters are the actual accidents as a result of those road conditions. the roads and streets. So even if the Great Port roads are somehow way worse, the fact that they get into fewer accidents, or they're less likely to be in an accident, that makes the road conditions irrelevant for purposes of this argument. And then choice E, the cost of collision damage insurance in Great Port and Fairmont with that in other cities. So this one sounded tempting at first because we had the word cost in there, and it was started to be like, oh yay, we have 2 right answers. But no, the cost of the insurance is not actually relevant, especially because we're comparing these 2 together versus other cities. And for the purposes of this argument, that shouldn't matter. The issue is Great Port versus Fairmont. Other cities are not in. They may show up in some other GMAT question, but they're not relevant in this one. So it's not actually E. E is cost of insurance, rather the cost of the premiums, rather than the cost of the repairs, which is what would determine whether insurance companies are making a profit off of Great Port. More of a profit. They're always making a profit. Okay. A little bit tricky one. Choice B is the right answer. Last one on page 493. Number 28. The technological conservatism of bicycle manufacturers is a reflection of the kinds of demand they are trying to meet. The only cyclists seriously interested in innovation and willing to pay for it are bicycle racers. Therefore, innovation in bicycle technology is limited by what authorities will accept as standard for purposes of competition in bicycle races. Which of the following is an assumption made in drawing the conclusion above? So this is one of those ones where, the evidence plus the assumption equals the conclusion can be a little bit helpful. Conclusion is always the easiest, well, almost always the easiest place to start, because it usually has signal words. In this case, it has therefore in front of it. And our conclusion is, therefore, innovation in bicycle technology is limited by what authorities will accept as standard for purposes of competition in bicycle races. So the conclusion, innovation limited by race authorities. Okay. The evidence is that bike racers drive innovation demand. Okay. And so remember, or you may not remember if you weren't listening to earlier broadcasts about this, that terms that appear in the conclusion that aren't part of the evidence are very often part of the assumption. And so here, clearly, the thing that appears in the conclusion that's not in the evidence is this stuff about race authorities and what's considered standard in races. And so clearly, the assumption deals something about bike racers and I don't know, what would we call this? Standards for races. Oh, or the bike racers' demand. Sorry, that the bike racers' demand is somehow tied to what's standard for races. So the evidence is that these guys drive innovation. The conclusion is that innovation is limited by what's accepted as standard. The assumption that the author is making and encouraging us to make as well is that bike racers choose innovations based on whether they're accepted by race authorities. That's the assumption. So we need something like that in the answer choices. So A, the market for cheap traditional bicycles cannot expand unless the market for high-performance competition bicycles expands. Well, cheap traditional bicycles, not in the picture at all. And this isn't an inference one. This is an assumption question. So it's a little bit different. The assumption is just the small logical leap that the author makes, and there's nothing about traditional bicycles there. Choice B, high-performance bicycles are likely to be improved more as a result of technological innovations developed in small workshops than as a result of technological innovations developed in major manufacturing concerns. This is one of those false splits where they create a dichotomy or a comparison that just doesn't exist in the passage. And that's certainly not going to be part of the assumption because there's nobody mentions large manufacturing concerns versus small workshops. That can't be part of the assumption. C, bicycle racers do not generate a strong demand for innovations that fall outside what is officially recognized as standard for purposes of competition. So again, in the conclusion, we had stuff about race authorities and what was standard for races, and it wasn't mentioned in the evidence, so that was probably in the assumption. Choice C is looking pretty good. Let's keep going, though. Choice D, the technological conservatism of bicycle manufacturers results primarily from their desire to manufacture a product that can be sold without being altered to suit different national markets. I like riding my bicycle. I don't know enough about bicycles to know whether that's true, but, you know, that sounds plausible. Way outside the scope, and it doesn't have anything to do with professional bike racers and official standards for races and stuff, so that can't be it. And choice E, the authorities who set standards for high-performance bicycle racing do not keep informed about innovative bicycle design. So even if true, that's still not the assumption that the author is making, because it doesn't matter whether they keep informed or not. Whatever the things that are accepted as standard for bicycle races, whether it's on a well-informed basis or not, that's what the author is saying that bike racers demand is based on. So choice E is kind of irrelevant whether the race officials know stuff or don't know stuff. So choice C is our correct answer, that that bike racers are willing to pay for stuff, but only as it relates to stuff accepted in official competition. Okay, we turn the page, and we are on page 494, number 29. This one's a little bit longer. Last year, a record number of new manufacturing jobs were created, and we can see this is a bold. Sorry, I'll interrupt my own reading. We can see this is a boldface one, so we already know that they're going to ask us what the function of the boldface things are. So it's particularly important in this case that we pay attention to the structure of the argument. Anyway, last year, a record number of new manufacturing jobs were created. Will this year bring another record? Well, a new manufacturing job is created either within an existing company or by the startup of a new company. Within existing firms, new jobs have been created this year at well below last year's record pace. At the same time, there is considerable evidence that the number of new companies starting up will be no higher this year than it was last year. And surely, the new companies starting up this year will create no more jobs per company than did last year's startups. Clearly, it can be concluded that the number of new jobs created this year will fall short of last year's record. So before we start looking at those answer choices, it's worth our while to try and come up with our own ideas about what those boldface things are doing. I think the easier one is the second one. Words like clearly, and especially words like concluded, tell you that you're dealing with a conclusion. And in fact, there was a question asked at the beginning of the passage. It says, will this year bring another record? Then at the end of the passage we get clearly it can be concluded that the number of new jobs created this year will fall short of last year's record. So basically the second boldface sentence is answering the question asked at the beginning. And we could pretty reasonably call that the conclusion. Will this happen? No, it will not happen. That's the conclusion. So then the question is, and without getting too specific about what to call these different types of evidence and whatever, even though the answer choices get into all this terminology, all we really need to do is have a rough idea of what the other boldface thing is doing. Does it support the conclusion or does it not support the conclusion? That's probably as far as we need to go without getting to the answer choices. So the other boldface thing says the new companies starting up this year will create no more jobs per company than did last year's startups. So to me, that sounds like something that supports the conclusion that they're not going to beat last year's record by saying there's not going to be any more new jobs per company suggests they're not going to, have a record number. So the first bold statement in some way supports the second bold statement, which is the conclusion. Let's look at the answer choices and see what they give us. Choice A, the first is a prediction that, if accurate, would provide support for the main conclusion of the argument. The second is that main conclusion. Well, that sounds all right, but I mean, prediction, if accurate, provide support for the main conclusion. Let's look at the other answer choices and see whether that holds up without thinking about it quite so much. Choice B, the first is a prediction that, if accurate, would provide support for the main conclusion of the argument. Okay, sounds good. The second is a conclusion drawn in order to support that main conclusion. Choice B is pretty tempting, but I think it's pretty clear that the second statement is in fact the main conclusion, not some kind of sub-conclusion drawn to support the main conclusion. The second boldface thing directly answers the question asked at the beginning of the passage. So choice B is right for the first half, wrong for the second half. Whereas choice A was right and right, or sounded right. Choice C, the first is an objection that the argument rejects. I think we decided it supported the conclusion, so that can't be right. The second is the main conclusion of the argument. Well, that part's true, but both of these need to be pluses for it to be the right answer. Choice D, the first is an objection that the argument rejects. I think we already reject that. And the second presents a conclusion that could be drawn if that objection were allowed to stand. Well, it's not an objection, so that's not right either. Choice D is double wrong. And choice E, the first is a claim that has been advanced in support of a position that the argument opposes. The second is a claim advanced in support of the main conclusion of the argument. Choice E, I'm not even sure what all that means. Actually, okay, look, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But really, the first one is not a claim that has been advanced in a position to support a position that the argument opposes. It is, in fact, in favor of the argument. So the first part of choice E is wrong. The second part is not a conclusion that could be drawn if that objection were allowed to stand. Because the previous thing isn't an objection, so the second part of choice E is also not right. Choice A, reading it back, the first is a prediction that, if accurate, would support the main conclusion, and the prediction is that the new company starting up probably will not have more jobs per company than last year. So that sounds like a prediction. And then the second thing, we definitely established that the second half was the main conclusion. So choice A, it is for number 29. So 494, number 30. Robot satellites relay important communications and identify weather patterns. Because the satellites can be repaired only in orbit, astronauts are needed to repair them. Without repairs, the satellites would eventually malfunction. Therefore, space flights carrying astronauts must continue. Which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the argument above? Again, sometimes they'll re-summarize for you what that argument is in the question part of the passage. This isn't one of them, so we need to go back and do our own little summary. The argument is that we need space flights, need astronaut flights, really. Astronaut flights, because satellites need repairs. And yeah, that's basically it. We need to have manned flights to space to repair satellites because these necessary satellites need repairs. So in order to weaken that, we would need to basically weaken one of these two elements. Again, this works the same way as before. When you really distill the argument down, it really can highlight for you what things your answer choice is going to need to focus on. So we might find an answer choice that says, well, we don't actually need astronauts to repair it. We can create other robots to repair satellites or something. Again, these are just wild predictions that I'm making. It's just giving us an idea of what sorts of things we might find in a correct answer. So if we don't need manned flights to outer space for some reason, that would weaken the argument. Also, weakening the argument would be something that says we don't actually need to repair these satellites. You know, maybe we can make them self-repairing. Maybe we make cheaper ones and then replace them. You know, maybe it's cheaper to just throw a new one up there and just let the old ones malfunction. You know, so one of those two things we need to have one of these two things highlighted in our correct answer choice. Let's see what we get. A, satellites falling from orbit because of malfunctions burn up in the atmosphere. That doesn't do either of those things. Choice B, although satellites are indispensable in the identification of weather patterns, weather forecasters also make some use of computer projections to identify weather patterns. Well, number one, it says that the satellites are indispensable. Number two, relaying important communications is also a function of satellites. So the fact that your weatherman can use a computer too, we still need the satellites. Choice C, the government, responding to public pressure, has decided to cut the budget for space flights and put more money into social welfare programs. Irrelevant, totally outside the scope of the passage. The scope is needing manned flights to space and needing to repair satellites. Choice D, repair of satellites requires heavy equipment, which adds to the amount of fuel needed to lift a spaceship carrying astronauts into orbit. Okay, well, that's nice, but it doesn't actually address the issue of satellites needing repairs or of people needing to do it. So it's not D. E, technical obsolescence of robot satellites makes repairing them more costly and less practical than sending new, improved satellites into orbit. So that was one of the options we were willing to consider, was that the satellites actually don't need to be repaired, we could just put new ones up there. And that's what choice E has us doing. So choice E is our correct answer. Oops, wrong button. Okay, 494. Question number 31. A company's two divisions performed with remarkable consistency over the past 3 years. In each of those years, the pharmaceuticals division has accounted for roughly 20% of dollar sales and 40% of profits, and the chemicals division for the balance. Which of the following can properly be inferred regarding the past 3 years from the statement above? So we had farm at 20% sales and 40% profits, which would mean that the chem had 80% of the sales and 60% of the profits. That's really, so we can infer that for sure. And more than that, I guess we actually have to look at the answer choices. And we know that these numbers were consistent over the past 3 years. So, choice A, total dollar sales for each of the company's divisions have remained roughly constant. We absolutely cannot infer that. And if you learn anything from the verbal that you can apply from the quant, it's this. Percents here are ratios. Their sales could have increased 1,000-fold, and the ratios could remain the same. So the actual total dollar sales, there's no way at all that they needed to remain roughly constant. Choice A is totally misleading. Although it's tempting because it does have something remaining constant, which is what the passage is about. Choice B, the pharmaceuticals division has faced stiffer competition in its market than has the chemicals division. There's nothing in the passage that supports any information at all about competition. They've had constant sales and profits. That's all we know. Choice C, the chemicals division has realized lower profits per dollar of sales than has the pharmaceuticals division. Well, just looking at the numbers, that actually looks like it's true. Pharmaceuticals had 20% of the sales but 40% of the profits. Chem had 80% of the sales but only 60% of the profits. So they're not getting as much, they're not making as much money per sale in the chemicals department as the pharmaceuticals department. So that actually sounds like a pretty fair inference based on the numbers that we were getting from the passage. Let's look at the other ones. Choice D, the product mix offered by each of the company's divisions has remained unchanged. That's another one that we cannot infer. We don't find out that they have the same products, only that they have the same numbers, same ratios, more specifically, over the past 3 years. So it's not D. E, highly profitable products accounted for a higher percentage of the chemicals division's sales than those of the pharmaceuticals divisions. So that's actually kind of unlikely because the chemicals division had lower profits per dollar of sale. They probably did not actually have a higher percentage of highly profitable products. In fact, it was probably the other way around. So if anything, 180, choice E is a 180 on what we actually need. That leaves us with choice C, that the chemicals department is just making less for every dollar of sales, but apparently they're still doing well. So, or badly, I guess. I mean, sales and profits don't necessarily tell us anything about the health of the company, just that pharmaceuticals is making more money on every dollar they sell. Let's do one more. Wrong color. On to the new page, one more question. Number 32. The Eurasian ruff, a fish species inadvertently introduced into North America's Great Lakes in recent years, feeds on the eggs of lake whitefish, a native species, thus threatening the lake's natural ecosystem. To help track the ruff's spread, government agencies have produced wallet-sized cards about the ruff. The cards contain pictures of the ruff and explain the danger they pose. The cards also request anglers to report any ruff they catch. Which of the following, if true, would provide most support for the prediction that the agency's actions will have its intended effect? The intended effect. Okay, so the intended effect is that these cards, cards given to anglers, will help. Will help with the ruff problem. So the prediction is that giving these cards is going to help. Which of the following would support the notion that giving cards with pictures of fish on them will help pictures of fish to fishermen, anglers, that's a type of fishing. We need an answer choice that supports the notion that giving cards to fishermen will deal with the actual fish. Choice A, the ruff has spiny fins that make it unattractive as prey. That doesn't involve cards or fishermen, so no. Choice B, ruff generally feed at night, but most recreational fishing on the Great Lakes is done during daytime hours. So because the prediction hinged on giving these cards to fishermen, if the ruff are out at night and the fishermen are out during the day, this actually weakens the argument. We need to strengthen it. Choice C, most people who fish recreationally on the Great Lakes are interested in the preservation of the lake whitefish because it is a highly prized game fish. So, giving the cards to fishermen could be helpful if those fishermen are really worried about, the ecosystem, in particular the fish. They want to catch the fish that the ruff wants to eat. So, these cards, in a sense, are being given to the people who would care the most about it. So we'll keep that as a possibility. Choice D, the ruff is one of several non-native species in the Great Lakes whose existence threatens the survival of lake whitefish populations there. So even though they're just one of the threats, there being more than one threat does not make the plan more or less likely to work. The issue hinges on whether giving cards to anglers is going to fix things or help with this particular ruff problem, not whether it's going to save the lake whitefish from everything that tries to eat it. Lastly, and actually I guess it's not going to save it from everything that tries to eat it because these anglers are trying to catch them and eat them. Anyway, choice E, the bait that most people use when fishing for whitefish on the Great Lakes is not attractive to ruff. If anything, this one also weakens it. If you're giving these cards to fishermen and saying, hey, if you catch one of these ugly fish, tell us. If the bait they're using is such that they're unlikely to catch one of these ugly ruffs, then it's probably not very likely to work because these are not going to be the guys who are going to see the ruffs and report them in the area. So, Choice E, definitely not it, leaving us with choice C. Hey, these cards are going to the guys who are most likely to care and are likely to catch the things. We will stop there. That's as good a place as any. My name's Jim Jacobson. You've been watching Grockit.com. That's supposed to be an arrow. And this is the official guide television program where we go through the official guide to the test question by question, cover to cover. Next time, we'll pick up with question number 33 on page 495, and I hope to see you then.